A legal firestorm has just erupted within the Roloff family, and the aftershocks could permanently shatter what little remains of their fragile peace. We have just received insider reports detailing a massive $2 million lawsuit filed by Amy Roloff against her ex-husband Matt Roloff and his fiancée, Caryn Chandler. This isn't about the farm sale or personal drama. This is an explosive accusation of calculated corporate fraud. The lawsuit alleges a deliberate and secret scheme masterminded by Caryn to steal millions in profits from the one part of the farm Amy still co-owned, the lucrative pumpkin season. Sources claim Caryn created a secret company to siphon money, leaving Amy with a business that was worthless on paper. But they underestimated Amy, and now their entire financial world is about to be torn apart in a court of law. Before we dive deep into the shocking details of this alleged betrayal and the forensic evidence that has blown this case wide open, please take a moment to show your support for this channel. If you believe in getting the real, behind-the-scenes story that the show will never tell you, hit that like button, subscribe to LPBW Update, and ring the notification bell. Your support allows us to continue bringing you these exclusive theories and in-depth reports. Now, let's unravel the pumpkin season partnership betrayal. To truly understand the magnitude of the betrayal alleged in this lawsuit, we have to rewind the clock. The sale of the north side of the farm by Amy to Matt was one of the most painful and publicly documented moments in Little People, Big World history. It was the end of an era, the closing of a chapter that had defined her life for 3 decades. But Amy, ever the savvy businesswoman, did not walk away completely. In a move that insiders at the time called brilliant, she negotiated a complex but crucial stipulation in the sale. While she was relinquishing her ownership of the land and the house she raised her children in, she was not relinquishing her stake in its most profitable enterprise. She retained her partnership in the pumpkin season business for a specified number of years. This wasn't a handshake deal. It was a legally binding partnership, a separate entity from the farm's real estate. It meant that for several more autumns, she would be Matt's business partner, entitled to her significant share of the profits generated by the tens of thousands of visitors who flocked to the farm each October. This single clause in the contract was Amy's financial anchor, her way of ensuring that the legacy she helped build from the ground up would continue to provide for her, even after she had moved off the property. For the first few years, according to financial analysts who have followed the family's businesses, the arrangement worked surprisingly well. The profits were consistent, even growing. Amy would fulfill her duties, greeting fans, participating in events, and then, at the end of the season, the books would be settled and she would receive her substantial payout. It was a clean, professional arrangement that, for a time, seemed to be a mature way for the former couple to coexist financially. But as the partnership's predetermined end date approached, sources close to the family say a shadow began to fall over the farm's finances. A new and ambitious player was solidifying her control, and according to the lawsuit's explosive claims, she saw Amy's final payout as an obstacle to be dismantled. That player was Caryn Chandler. The central theory laid out in the lawsuit, pieced together from reports and analysis of the situation, is that Caryn Chandler devised a sophisticated scheme with one clear objective: to systematically devalue Amy's final share of the pumpkin season partnership to near zero. The motive, insiders speculate, was twofold. First, there was the financial aspect. Any money paid to Amy was money not available for Matt and Caryn's own projects, like the construction of their new dream home. A multi-million-dollar buyout for Amy's final share would be a significant financial blow. But sources suggest a deeper, more personal motive was at play. Caryn, having transitioned from farm manager to Matt's partner and fiancé, was allegedly determined to erase every last vestige of Amy's operational and financial influence over the farm. As long as Amy was a partner, receiving a massive check each year, she retained a form of power and a presence that Caryn found intolerable. Amy wasn't just Matt's ex-wife. She was a business partner with a right to see the books and ask questions. The alleged scheme was designed not just to save money, but to deliver a final crushing blow, effectively stating that Amy's contribution was now worthless and that Caryn was the undisputed new matriarch of Roloff Farms. The lawsuit alleges that the vehicle for this fraud was a new, secret, limited liability company, or LLC. According to legal documents that our sources have described, Caryn Chandler quietly registered a new entity called Roloff Farm Events, LLC. On the surface, this might not seem unusual. Businesses often create new LLCs for liability protection or organizational purposes. But the lawsuit claims this company was created for a singular, sinister purpose: to act as a secret vault to divert the pumpkin season partnership's most valuable revenue streams. This wasn't a subsidiary of the main partnership. It was an entirely separate entity, a sole proprietorship registered to and controlled exclusively by one person, Caryn Chandler. It was a corporate ghost existing in the shadows, its books completely hidden from Amy Roloff, who was still by law a full partner in the primary business. According to the claims, Matt Roloff either knowingly participated in this deception or was willfully blind to it, allowing Caryn to manage the finances in a way that directly defrauded his former wife and business partner. The creation of this LLC was the first step in a conspiracy that, according to the lawsuit, would siphon over $2 million from Amy's rightful share. With the secret corporate vehicle in place, the lawsuit alleges that Caryn began a systematic process of rerouting the partnership's income. It started subtly. New high-margin merchandise like premium branded apparel and specialty food items were allegedly processed not through the old partnership's payment systems, but through new systems linked directly to Roloff Farm Events, LLC. Then came the bigger ticket items. The lawsuit claims that lucrative private tours and corporate event packages, which often command five-figure fees, were booked and billed exclusively through the new LLC. To the outside world, nothing had changed. The events were still happening at Roloff Farms. The visitors still saw the Roloff name. But behind the scenes, the money was flowing into a different pot, one that Amy had no access to and no knowledge of. The most audacious move, as detailed in the explosive court filings described to us, involved the partnership's largest sources of revenue. First, a major national brand, a long-term sponsor of pumpkin season, was allegedly instructed to make its annual $250,000 sponsorship payment not to the established Roloff Farms pumpkin season partnership, but to the new Roloff Farm Events, LLC. This single transaction, a massive chunk of the season's profit, was allegedly diverted with a simple change in payment instructions. But the grand prize was the online ticket sales. In the modern age, the vast majority of pumpkin season tickets are sold online in advance. This creates a massive, predictable, and easily trackable stream of revenue. The lawsuit claims that the entire online ticketing portal was quietly reconfigured to deposit all funds, totaling over $800,000 for the final season, directly into the bank account of Caryn's secret company. On the official partnership books, the books that Amy was entitled to see, these revenue streams simply vanished. The profits appeared to have plummeted, creating a false narrative of a failing business. In reality, the business was more successful than ever. The profits were just being stolen in plain sight. As the final year of the partnership concluded, Amy began to sense that something was deeply wrong. Having been a hands-on operator of pumpkin season for decades, she had an intuitive feel for its rhythms and its success. She saw the record-breaking crowds, the long lines for attractions, the merchandise flying off the shelves. The energy on the farm screamed success. Yet, the preliminary financial reports she was receiving from Matt and Caryn told a completely different story. They were filled with vague excuses and gloomy projections. They blamed rising insurance costs, poor weather on a handful of days, and lower than expected visitor spending. According to a source close to Amy's legal team, every explanation felt flimsy and contradicted the reality she had witnessed. The numbers simply didn't add up. Her requests for more detailed breakdowns of revenue streams were allegedly met with delays and obfuscation. Matt would reportedly defer all financial questions to Caryn, who would provide spreadsheets with top-line numbers that lacked the granular detail necessary for a true audit. The tension culminated in a final, fateful meeting. Matt and Caryn presented Amy with the official doctored books for the partnership. The document showed a business whose profits had fallen off a cliff, declining by a supposed 70% from the previous year. Based on these fraudulent numbers, they made her a buyout offer that was described as insultingly pathetic. It was a low five-figure sum for a business share that she knew in her gut was worth well over $1 million. It was in that moment, seeing the false numbers on the page and the disingenuous looks on their faces, that Amy knew this wasn't a bad year or a miscalculation. This was a deliberate betrayal. She wasn't just being lowballed, she was being cheated. She politely refused their offer, left the meeting, and her next call was to a lawyer. Amy Roloff did not hire just any small-town attorney. Understanding the complexity of the situation and the depth of the alleged fraud, she retained a high-powered law firm known for its expertise in corporate litigation and, crucially, its formidable forensic accounting department. Her legal team immediately went on the offensive. They didn't just file a complaint for breach of contract. They filed a multi-count lawsuit alleging breach of fiduciary duty, fraudulent concealment, and civil conspiracy. The core demand of the lawsuit was not just for payment, but for a court-ordered forensic audit of not only the pumpkin season partnership, but of all of Matt Roloff's and Caryn Chandler's related business entities. This was a legal masterstroke. By demanding access to everything, they prevented Matt and Caryn from hiding the money in yet another shell company. The lawsuit alleges that there was a coordinated effort to deceive and defraud Amy, and it sought to pierce the corporate veil, a legal term for breaking down the liability protection of an LLC to hold the owners personally responsible for the company's fraudulent actions. When the lawsuit was served, it reportedly sent a shockwave through Matt and Caryn's world. They had expected a negotiation, perhaps an argument over the final number. They had not anticipated a full-scale legal assault armed with accusations of fraud. Their alleged scheme was predicated on the idea that Amy would either believe their lies or lack the resources and the will to challenge them in court. They had fundamentally misjudged her resolve. The filing of the lawsuit marked the beginning of the discovery phase, a period where lawyers can subpoena documents, depose witnesses, and demand access to all financial records. For Matt and Caryn, the clock was ticking. The paper trail that Caryn had allegedly created to siphon the money was about to be exposed to the harsh light of legal scrutiny. The discovery process was a legal battle in itself. According to sources familiar with the proceedings, Matt and Caryn's legal team tried every tactic to slow down and obstruct the investigation. They filed motions to limit the scope of the audit, claimed that documents were protected by proprietary privilege, and provided mountains of irrelevant paperwork to bury the crucial evidence. But Amy's legal team was relentless. They filed countermotions to compel the release of the documents, arguing that as a partner in the original business, Amy was legally entitled to see where the revenue had gone, even if it was moved to a different entity without her consent. The judge, reportedly seeing through the delay tactics, sided with Amy at every turn, issuing a series of court orders that forced Matt and Caryn to turn over everything: bank statements, sponsorship agreements, online payment processing records, and the incorporation documents for Roloff Farm Events, LLC. This is where the case turned. With full access to the financial records, Amy's forensic accounting team began to piece together the puzzle. They followed the money, they traced the payment from the national sponsor directly into Caryn's LLC account. They subpoenaed the records from the online ticketing company, which proved that over $800,000 had been deposited into an account that had no legal connection to the partnership Amy was a part of. They meticulously cross-referenced the revenue from merchandise and private tours, demonstrating a clear pattern of diversion. What emerged was not a case of sloppy bookkeeping, but a clear, undeniable, and documented trail of systematic fraud. The accountants prepared a detailed report, complete with flowcharts and highlighted bank statements, that would become the centerpiece of Amy's case. It was the smoking gun, a step-by-step chronicle of the alleged $2 million heist. The stage was now set for the trial, and the star witness was not going to be a member of the Roloff family, but the forensic accountant who had unearthed the entire conspiracy. As the trial began, the courtroom was thick with tension. Amy sat with her legal team, calm and resolute. Across the aisle, Matt and Caryn appeared visibly stressed. Their defense strategy, according to legal analysts, was to argue that the creation of Roloff Farm Events was a standard business restructuring. They claimed the money was moved to a new entity for tax and liability purposes, and that they had always intended to reconcile the books and pay Amy her fair share, but that she had preemptively filed the lawsuit before they could do so. It was a weak argument, and it was about to be completely dismantled. Amy's lead attorney called their expert witness to the stand, a certified forensic accountant with decades of experience in untangling complex financial fraud cases. What followed was a masterclass in financial storytelling. The accountant, using large diagrams and projecting documents onto a screen for the judge to see, walked the court through the entire scheme, step by painstaking step. He began by showing the historical profit and loss statements from the pumpkin season partnership for the previous 5 years. They showed consistent, healthy profits, establishing a clear baseline. Then he put up the statement for the final year, the one Matt and Caryn had presented to Amy. It showed the dramatic 70% drop in revenue. The defendants would have you believe, the accountant stated in a clear, measured voice, that this catastrophic drop was due to market forces, that in a single year, this incredibly popular and stable business simply collapsed. He paused for effect, letting the statement hang in the air. But our investigation found that the money didn't just disappear, it was rerouted. The forensic accountant's testimony was the pivotal moment of the trial. With the judge's full attention, he began to unspool the conspiracy. "Your Honor," he began, "while the official partnership's revenue shows a 70% decline, we found that money didn't just disappear. It was rerouted. For example, a $250,000 sponsorship from a national brand was paid not to the partnership, but to a new LLC. The profits from all online ticket sales, totaling over $800,000, were diverted to this same entity." He presented the bank statements for Roloff Farm Events, LLC, showing the massive influx of cash during the pumpkin season months, cash that corresponded precisely with the revenue missing from the official partnership's books. He showed the emails where corporate sponsors were given new wiring instructions. He presented the contract with the ticketing company, signed by Caryn Chandler, directing all proceeds to her new company. It was an avalanche of evidence, meticulously presented and impossible to refute. Amy's lawyer approached the witness stand. "And who owns this new LLC, Roloff Farm Events?" he asked. The accountant responded without hesitation. "It is a sole proprietorship registered to one person, Caryn Chandler. The partnership's assets and revenue streams, its sponsorships, its ticket sales, its most valuable income sources were systematically stripped and moved into an entity controlled exclusively by her, leaving my client's share of the original business nearly worthless on paper." The courtroom was silent. At that moment, the entire defense strategy crumbled. This was no longer a dispute over a buyout number. It was a clear-cut case of corporate fraud laid bare for the court to see. The paper trail was undeniable, and it led directly to Caryn Chandler, with Matt Roloff standing right beside her. The impact of the accountant's testimony was like a detonation in the silent courtroom. Matt Roloff, who had been trying to project an air of confident nonchalance, visibly paled. His eyes darted from the screen, showing his own bank records to Caryn, whose composure had completely fractured. Her lawyer, a man who had clearly been operating on the weak defense narrative they had concocted, looked stunned, as if he himself was only just now seeing the full, irrefutable scope of the evidence. He had been prepared to argue about business practices, not to defend against a mountain of meticulously documented evidence of fraud. On cross-examination, the defense attorney's attempt to regain control was a disaster. He tried to discredit the accountant by suggesting that creating new LLCs was a common business practice for liability reasons. The accountant calmly agreed. "Yes, it is common," he said, looking directly at the judge. "However, it is not common practice to move 100% of your partnership's most valuable revenue streams into that new LLC without the knowledge or consent of your partner, and then present that partner with financial statements from the old entity that falsely reflect a 70% loss." The lawyer then tried to suggest that the money was simply being held and that a reconciliation was planned. The accountant was ready for this. If a reconciliation were planned, there would be an intercompany loan agreement, a shareholder resolution, or at the very least, a memo or email to the other partner, Ms. Roloff, informing her of this new accounting procedure. We requested any and all such documents. None were provided because, as the evidence shows, none exist. This wasn't an accounting procedure. It was a fraudulent conveyance. Every question the defense lawyer asked only served to dig his client's hole deeper, reinforcing the prosecution's narrative and making Matt and Caryn look even more guilty. When Caryn Chandler was called to the stand, she attempted to portray herself as a savvy, but perhaps overly ambitious business manager. She testified that she created Roloff Farm Events, LLC, to streamline operations and to take on new ventures that were outside the scope of the original pumpkin season partnership. She claimed it was all part of a larger, long-term business strategy that would have ultimately benefited everyone. "I was just trying to be efficient," she said, forcing a smile. "Matt is the creative genius, the ideas man. I handle the books and the strategy. I was structuring things for the future for after the partnership with Amy had ended." But under a withering cross-examination from Amy's lawyer, her story fell apart. "Ms. Chandler," the lawyer began, "if this was for the future, why did you divert the sponsorship payment for the current partnership season into your new company?" Caryn faltered. "It was a deposit for future collaborations." The lawyer pounced. "A deposit? The invoice which you yourself sent clearly states it is for sponsorship of the 2023 pumpkin season, a season in which my client was a full partner. Can you explain that?" Caryn couldn't. He continued. "And the online ticket sales, Ms. Chandler, why were they diverted? Were the tens of thousands of people who bought those tickets attending a future event? Or were they attending the pumpkin season that Ms. Roloff was your partner in?" She stammered about payment processors and logistical issues, but the damage was done. Her excuses were transparently false. The final question was devastating. Ms. Chandler, in all of your efficient restructuring, did you ever once send an email, a text message, or make a single phone call to your business partner, Amy Roloff, to inform her that you were moving nearly $2 million of the partnership's revenue into your own personal company? Her silence was the only answer she had. Matt Roloff's testimony was even more calamitous. He attempted to distance himself from the entire financial aspect of the business, painting himself as the hands-on farmer who was too busy building attractions and managing the property to be bothered with spreadsheets. "I trust Caryn completely," he said, gesturing towards her. "She is brilliant with the business side of things. I don't get involved in day-to-day accounting. My focus is on making sure the visitors have the best experience possible." It was a classic attempt to plead ignorance to position Caryn as the sole architect of the scheme, but Amy's lawyer was prepared for this. He presented Matt with the signature pages for the partnership's bank accounts. "Mr. Roloff, you are a signatory on these accounts, are you not?" Matt had to admit he was. "And you have a fiduciary duty to your partner, Ms. Roloff, to act in the best interest of the partnership, correct?" Again, Matt had to agree. The lawyer then laid the trap. "So when the revenue from your biggest sponsor disappeared from the partnership account, you didn't notice? When the nearly $1 million in online ticket sales never arrived, you, as a responsible partner with a fiduciary duty, never once asked your fiancé where that money had gone?" Matt was cornered. To admit he knew would be to confess to conspiracy. To claim he didn't know would be to admit to a level of negligence so profound that it was a breach of his legal duty as a partner. "I assumed Caryn was handling it," he mumbled. The lawyer's voice was sharp. You assumed while your partner's equity, the culmination of 30 years of her life's work, was being systematically siphoned into an account controlled by your fiancé, an account from which you both personally benefited. You didn't fulfill your duty, Mr. Roloff. You abdicated it. The final witness to take the stand was Amy Roloff. Her testimony was not about numbers or corporate structures. It was about trust and betrayal. Speaking with a quiet dignity, she recounted the decades she had spent building the pumpkin season business from a small roadside stand into a regional tourist destination. She spoke of hauling pumpkins with her children, of developing recipes for the pumpkin salsa, and of standing for hours in the cold to greet every family that came through the gates. "That farm wasn't just a business to me," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "It was my life, my home. When I sold my share of the property, the one piece I kept was the partnership in pumpkin season. It was my legacy. It was my connection to the life I had built." She then described the final meeting with Matt and Caryn. "When they showed me those numbers, it felt like a physical blow. I knew what we had earned. I saw the crowds. I saw the sales. I knew the numbers were a lie. And to have my partner, the father of my children, sit there and present me with a fraudulent document, it was a betrayal on a level I find hard to describe." Her testimony resonated with a raw authenticity that stood in stark contrast to the evasive and self-serving statements of Matt and Caryn. She wasn't just a plaintiff seeking money. She was a founding partner who had been cheated out of her legacy by the two people she should have been able to trust the most. The closing arguments were a mere formality. Amy's lawyer methodically summarized the mountain of evidence, describing the case as one of the most clear-cut examples of partner fraud he had ever seen. He painted a picture of calculated greed, of a deliberate conspiracy to defraud Amy, hatched and executed by Caryn with Matt's full knowledge and complicity. He asked the judge not only for Amy's rightful share of the stolen money, but also for punitive damages to punish the defendants for their egregious breach of trust. Matt and Caryn's lawyer, by contrast, had little to work with. He could only feebly reiterate the argument that it was all a misunderstanding, a business restructuring that was poorly communicated. He pleaded for leniency, arguing that his clients had simply made a mistake in judgment, not committed a crime. But everyone in the courtroom knew that the evidence was too overwhelming, the paper trail was too clear, the lies had been exposed. As the judge declared a short recess to review the final evidence before delivering a verdict, Matt and Caryn sat in stunned silence, the reality of their situation finally crashing down upon them. Their scheme had not only failed, it had backfired in the most spectacular and public way imaginable. When the judge returned, the verdict was swift and brutal. She looked directly at Matt and Caryn, her expression one of utter disdain. "I have reviewed the evidence presented in this case," she began, her voice ringing with authority, "and frankly, I find the defendant's explanations to be not credible. This was not a business restructuring. This was a deliberate and fraudulent scheme to devalue a partner's equity." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. The creation of a new LLC for the sole purpose of diverting partnership revenue without the knowledge or consent of the other partner is a textbook case of corporate fraud and a profound breach of fiduciary duty. The court hereby orders the piercing of the corporate veil. All revenue from Roloff Farm Events, LLC, is to be considered revenue of the original partnership. The judge then turned to the financial remedy. "I am ordering an immediate payout to Ms. Roloff for her full share of the $2 million in diverted funds plus interest. That's a $1 million judgment. Additionally, for this egregious breach of fiduciary duty, the defendants will pay all legal and accounting fees for the plaintiff." It was a total and complete victory for Amy. The judge had not only awarded her every penny she was owed, but she had also made Matt and Caryn responsible for the massive legal bill Amy had incurred to uncover their deception. In a single ruling, the judge had undone their entire conspiracy and turned it against them. The aftermath of the verdict, according to insider reports, has been nothing short of catastrophic for Matt and Caryn. The court immediately placed a lien on the Roloff Farm Events, LLC bank account, freezing the very $2 million they had allegedly siphoned. Amy's $1 million judgment, plus hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal and accounting fees, was paid directly from that frozen account. The money they had tried to steal from Amy was used to pay for her legal victory against them. The irony is staggering. Their scheme to save $1 million ended up costing them well over that amount, not to mention the public humiliation and the irreparable damage to their reputations. The financial strain is said to be immense. The funds they had likely earmarked for the completion of their new dream home were suddenly gone, vaporized by their own greed. Construction on the massive new house has reportedly ground to a halt, its unfinished frame now a monument to their failed conspiracy. The entire financial future of Roloff Farms is now in question. With such a massive judgment and a reputation for fraudulent business practices, securing future sponsorships or business loans could become nearly impossible. This legal bombshell has also sent a devastating shockwave through the Roloff family. For Zach and Tori, who are already deeply estranged from Matt over his refusal to sell them a portion of the farm, this news is seen as the ultimate validation of their feelings. It confirms their long-held belief that Caryn's influence has been a toxic one and that Matt's business decisions are no longer guided by family, but by greed. The verdict likely represents the final nail in the coffin for any chance of reconciliation between Matt and his son. For the other Roloff children, it creates an impossible situation, forcing them to reckon with the fact that their father has been legally declared a fraud who conspired to cheat their mother out of millions of dollars. The carefully constructed image of the Roloff family that was presented on television for years has been irrevocably shattered. Amy Roloff, on the other hand, has emerged from this ordeal stronger and more vindicated than ever. She trusted her instincts, stood up for herself, and refused to be bullied. She used their own complex paper trail to expose them and, in the end, walked away with a massive 7-figure judgment that was paid for by the very money they tried to steal. She has closed the final chapter on her business relationship with Matt Roloff, not as a victim, but as a victor. This is a story you will never see play out on the main show, a testament to the complex and often dark realities that exist behind the camera. What do you think about this shocking turn of events? Do you believe Matt was a willing participant, or was he manipulated by Caryn? Let us know your theories in the comments below. And as always, for the stories the network won't tell you, make sure you are subscribed to LPBW Update. Thank you for watching.